Medicine Mondays, and I'm your host, the Freedom Doctor, Roman Johnson. And today, we have the amazing Hess Love as our guest. Hess Love is an amazing spiritual worker from the DMV area. And Hess will tell you about her background now. So just a general question, like, where are you from? What city are you from? What's your background? And what was your journey to becoming a spiritual worker?
So I'm originally from Annapolis, Maryland, and I currently live in Baltimore City. And the funny thing is that, like, every other place I go in Maryland, like, hey, where are you from? Baltimore. But the moment I'm in Baltimore, like, folks here know I'm not from here. They know I'm from Maryland, but they're like, you're not from Baltimore, are you? But the love here is just the same. So I've always been like a Chesapeake person for most of my life. I spent a little bit of time in New York as a kid, and something really interesting. I remember visiting my uncle, my mom's dad, in New York, and getting lost somewhere in Harlem. And he was like, how you get lost? I'm like, I'm not from here, dude. He's like, but you are from here. And it made me think about how we are from wherever our stories are, right? Yeah. And so I have stories in New York. I have stories in Maryland. I have stories in North Carolina and Virginia, because that's where a lot of my mom's family is from. I have stories like in Louisiana. I have stories in so many places. And so, like, I'm from a lot of places within the continent, well, not the continental US, but I spent most of my time in the Chesapeake area. And my journey as a hoodoo, a lot of other hoodoos have said this, but it started with trying to process grief. Like, I don't think it's, unsimilar from everyone else. And I was having a really hard time with my grandmother's death for years. Like, she raised me, and trying to find that, like, connection, trying to seek her wisdom and her guidance. There was something she told me growing up all the time, and other folks may have heard this, but she was like, when I die, you're going to be a lost ball in high weeds. And I was like, why would you say that to me? But the truth is, it was hella true. And hoodoo was my way of cutting down those weeds. And so I can, like, clear a path for myself and roll out and see things for what they are. I started hoodoo, like so many folks, who kind of starting to rediscover their, like, African diaspora traditions online. First thing you run into is that Wicca shit, right? And then you run into every other
everywhere.
It do. They got the corner, they got the market on lock. They got Wicca, everything. They are uber accessible, to a detriment, to a point, right? And then you learn about other African diaspora traditions, and then you start wondering, like, oh, this is cool. This, feels like home-ish. Like, it feels like a place I can visit and feel at home, but, like, not me. So I started trying to wonder, what do Black folks in the continental, like, US have? And then came across hoodoo. And then the more I learned about hoodoo, the more I learned that it's been around my whole life. And for a lot of Black folks, it's been around our whole life. We just didn't have a name for it. We didn't call it something.
So talk more about hoodoo. Hoodoo is this thing that in our families is a secret practice often, and now because of the internet, there's been a lot more visibility about the practice, but not necessarily about the mysteries, which is what you were saying pre this interview. So talk about the Black hoodoo versus that inauthentic other stuff, we'll call it.
Yeah. So real Black hoodoo is Black culture. Like, you cannot have hoodoo without Black people. You cannot have hoodoo without Black culture. It is just permeated in every aspect of our being and our expression, from our dancing to our food to our language and our idioms. There's even, like, a Black linguist who he created a whole textbook called The B Forms in hoodoo text. And so what he did was, like, all of you've heard, like, those stories, like, I think it's Hyatt. What's his name?
Hyatt. Yeah. What the Wyatt stories?
Yeah, that white man.
Yeah, that white man who recorded all the formerly enslaved Black folks about different hoodoo stories. That was Hyatt. Are you talking about Lorenzo Dow Turner, the linguist with the Black?
The B Forms of hoodoo text.
I think so.
That sounds familiar to you. So pretty much the book, I can't remember the guy, but I was so like enthused when I found it. But pretty much the book was like he like scoured every like text where someone was talking about hoodoo and decided to like really investigate like the B forms and like Black language.
Yeah.
And I pointed that to say like hoodoo is literally everywhere in Black culture. Like you cannot go anywhere and not run into hoodoo. You just don't have a name for it. But there's always this very spiritual element about everything that we do. There's this highly connective element about everything that we do. And so the real Black hoodoo is Black culture. Like it could not exist without us. The white hoodoo, you know.
The real Black hoodoo is Black culture. That was a bomb. That was a jam. Carry on, got it. Let's carry on.
so
Carry on. Carry on. You can get that.
So the white hoodoo is pretty much whatever they try to sell you that is divorced of living Black people. So if you notice, like a lot of white folks will say it's African American folk magic and they think that's enough. But the way that they like position it is like this is the skills and tips and trades of Black people who no longer exist no more. These newfangled Blacks ain't doing it, but your white ass can come up here and get this old slave magic, and that's not how it goes, right? Like the real fake hoodoo is one that sells you something that they believe come from dead people, and when you're a real hoodoo, you know it's a living tradition and living people, right? The fake hoodoo was like, me.
Go ahead.
So like the fake hoodoo is hyper focused on things not living, right? The inanimate objects, the things that they do not respect as living beings. Like they just, you know, packaging up any herb and saying here, they packaged up any dirt and saying there. Like the real hoodoo really, you know, sits there and acknowledges the divinity in everything that is around us, right? And then the white hoodoo is like acknowledges the consumeristic value of it. And the white hoodoo, I think, just most apparently got white people in it and hoodoo don't. Like the moment you start seeing folks saying, and then Europeans, you know, this, that, and the third, boom, 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 like that's when we're going into that white shit. The way I like to say it is that hoodoo doesn't have European influences, it has European interruptions, right?
Yeah.
And so like white people just interrupt shit. And
Yeah.
the way that hoodoo, you know, exists now is that it's a tradition that we're trying to like actively reclaim from being this highly pilfered but sacred thing due to white interruption.
Right. And that makes me think about Black culture in general, that like Black culture is African, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in the Americas, and the interruption of enslavement, right, was an interruption to African culture. It didn't stop it, you know, but it did change it. And
Mm-hmm.
when I think of hoodoo root work, you know, I think of the same thing. And so kind of going back to that cultural appropriation question, like we have people who believe that hoodoo is this thing that you can buy, right? So you need to buy candles, you need, you know, you got to use green, you got to use blue. Do you feel like the consumerist or capitalist tendency within like hoodoo is authentic, or do you think it has hoodoo didn't start out? Did it start out as, my question is, has it always been consumerist, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I believe that so it's multifold, right? In a lot of African and diaspora traditions, we acknowledge the sacredness of the marketplace, the exchange. You know, I want something for you, so I'm going to give something to you. Even when we are harvesting like a root or a plant, we want something, so we give. And so the act of exchange is not foreign to hoodoo, you know, but the act of hyper consumerism definitely is. You don't really need like, you know, the real old hoodoo, because hoodoo's living tradition, so it adapts as we adapt, right? But they wasn't going to the stores, the Botanica, to buy like, you know, a block breaker candle or whatever. They weren't buying their herbs off a line. They weren't really buying crystals. They were sourcing everything from around them, and they had to get to know the properties of all the natural materials and other like material like dirt and nails and spikes, you know, just from working with it. the way that I like to think of Hoodoo is that it's not a consumerist tradition, it's like a sensuous one. It's one where you feel a lot of things. And, I think for those of us who, have gone through trying to use retail therapy to massage whatever we're going through, like you don't really feel a lot of shit when you're buying a whole bunch of stuff. You feel that momentary thrill, but then after that, it's just like, what's after? And Hoodoo doesn't have that. Like you have to build these relationships, in such like a deliberate and intentional way that the feeling that you get is not momentary. It lasts for such a long time because you have that. And so, no, you don't need a green candle for money. You don't need this. You can get it now if you want to, and there's no shame in that. But if you want to go outside and be like, look here, I got this jar and some oil, and I see, some purple dead nettle on the back, and I'm gonna figure out how it do what it do and make something shake. You go ahead and do that, because that's pretty much what your ancestors did too.
Exactly. And like you said, you can use a green candle, but you don't need a green candle because our ancestors had connections with the natural world, which is the same thing as the spiritual world, right? And they made it do what it do with what they had. So like when you saw things in nature that grow abundant, like what's those little plants that be by that grow a lot, by it's like a type of ivy.
Like the English ivy, kind of.
Yeah, a plant that grow a lot that might be associated with abundance, right? Because you want prosperity, you want things that grow, you want your wealth to grow like English ivy. And they thought about the natural world and used it. And that when I think about authentic Hoodoo, I think about that things that you. Oh Lord. So we lost our guest. She'll be back on momentarily. I'm going to check in with her. Okay. Ashe, see that? Look at God. Hey, okay. We lost you for a minute. What I was saying. what I was saying. What I was saying is, yeah. So like when I think about Hoodoo, I think about the natural world and using that because like our ancestors wasn't buying candles on the plantation, right? They had oil lamps, things that were right by them to use, and it was used for protection, and just meeting everyday life, right? So thank you for opening it up for us. And I want to pivot and talk about and ask you about your opinions on how the practice of Hoodoo has been demonized, which I think has led to it being, pushed underground, like people don't want to talk about it because anything that's African in this white supremacist worldview is inherently, evil. So can you please help us unpack that?
So I think there's this religious researcher. I don't think, but I think that's her topic of study. I could be wrong. And her name is Catherine Gerber. And she's actually a white lady, but her work is solid as hell. And pretty much her work focuses on the ways that white men particularly went around the world and started, classifying what's religion and what's criminal, what's religion and what's demonized. And so pretty much a lot of African indigenous, spiritualities were considered, were criminalized. They were considered like heathenish, godless and prone to violence, prone to whatever thing that they could project onto us that they were actually doing. So that's one part of it. The other part is that particularly Hoodoo does have parts of it that were literally like banned. They were illegal. So for instance, we know in diaspora and African traditions, the drum is very sacred as a form of communicating through many things. Like there are some spirits that are associated with the drum. But after the Stoner Rebellion in South Carolina, the drum was banned because they were like, y'all not drumming shit and warning each other about nothing. That's it.
Right. I even think about places like New Orleans where drumming was outlawed because of the presence of a whole lot of Africans, right? And a whole lot of people from the same ethnic group, right? And white people were very fearful of that because you had common language and a common ethnic history. So yeah, keep talking though. Like this This is so good. This is so good.
So also in South Carolina, but again in Virginia, like root working was literally banned. There was a law, can't remember which state, but it was like if we catch any Black people, utilizing like herbs and other potions, for healing or, medical reasons, like we'll kill you. And the reason that happened is because a lot of poisoning would often happen. And so there's this book called Twice Condemned that kind of lists like a lot of the ways that Black folks were criminalized, and poisoning was like a high thing. Like poisoning was highly feared by a lot of white folks. And they, of course, associated that with, okay, root working, devil worshiping, hoodoo, whatever the hell that slave religion is, they associated with, like, and the association was correct because we know that root working is a part of hoodoo, but that added to the demonization. They're like, you utilize these things in your knowledge and your spiritual abilities to harm us. Congregating was banned for Black people. Like we still have ways now where it's like no loitering or whatever, right? And we know that hoodoo does not exist without community, as Mama Ru says. So it's like if we cannot congregate, like how are we going to be able to do this? Like none of these, diaspora traditions are ones for like solitary practitioners. They're very communal. The other thing is public opinion. And so we know that majority of people who were enslaved or in bondage, majority of them did not convert to Christianity till like, I think the mid-ish, like 1800s or whatever. So they spent hundreds of years, the majority of them not being Christian, and then sometime, during that like mass conversion, so many things that whatever could not, successfully or easily be syncretized within the church became demonized because it was just way too overt for anything. And so you had like the institution of the church and religion adding to that demonization. Also intellectual circles, because I think even W.E.D. Du Bois, says that like kind of like the voodooism, these churches are just voodoo, whatever. And a lot of times they kind of view people who did root work and hoodoo and conjuring as backwards, like not intelligent, you don't know what you're talking about. Or if you were successful in life, you would never need to do any of this stuff. Or let's leave these like very unevolved ways behind us too. Like there are so many things that added to the demonization of hoodoo over centuries, that it's been existing on this land.
Yes. And so I love that. And through all the demonization, we still maintain our hoodoo and our root work practices. So you mentioned hoodoo and you mentioned root work. Some people think these are the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Help educate us. Are they the same thing or are they different?
I can't take credit for this. I'm gonna first shout out Mama Root because she's the whole truth and a half. Because I used to say hoodoo, root work, conjure as like, all they mean the same thing and they don't. So hoodoo is the overall term for like everything. And it's like the umbrella term, right? And then under that umbrella, you have, of course, the culture. Like you can be a hoodoo culturally because it's an ethno religion, but you may not be a practitioner, and that's fine. It's a cultural thing. Then under that, you also have like root work, and then you have conjuring. And root work and conjuring are different because root work, talks about a relationship with the earth and the plants, and conjuring is a relationship with your words and the things that you're able to evoke through like just you and your ways of working through spirit and through energies as well.
Yes. Thank you for that great explanation. And so um so then lead us to like how within hoodoo you've reclaimed your ancestral power, and how did you reclaim your spiritual power through this Black tradition?
So much of the ways I've reclaimed hoodoo, like spiritually, is by seeing so many Black and queer representations, in the ways that hoodoo lived. And so, like, hoodoo did not only live in the church, but it also lived in blues music. And, like, blues had hella queer folks, back then. And like when you just listen to the lyrics, like they was talking about root work, they was talking about hoodooing somebody and being bonded and being fixed, and just feeling like life was a rut. And I think it was through the blues, particularly as a musical genre, that it just kind of was like, there's a place for me here. Like, I have a representation, an ancestral representation, of myself, in this practice. And it never excluded us. Like Hoodoo does not exclude any Black person at all. And so
Yeah.
I reclaimed, my spiritual powers by, seeing myself and a representation of myself and my likeness, and knowing that I do not have to fight for a place. And it's an incredibly great feeling when you know that you do not have to fight to be seen as whole and divine. And just kind of that love is how I reclaim that my spiritual powers. And, I think one of them is I think I'm really good at building community. And I desperately, want,
Oh,
yeah.
I said you are, in fact, and we'll talk
Okay.
about it.
And I so desperately want Black folks to, even if you're not a hoodoo, like to feel like they have a space with somebody, because we inherently deserve that, right? And I think like that's an incredible hoodoo practice, because again, it couldn't exist without community, and it's a communal, thing. And so like the gathering of people and making sure that we are holding our stories and passing them, I think is my gift.
Yes. And y'all, Hess said hoodoo is one of the major Black inclusive religions out here. Hoodoo is a culture, hoodoo is a religion. And that is so dope. And you just talked about being queer, and that really hits home to me as a queer Black person myself. Cause like, I remember first being introduced to hoodoo as a culture in my 11th grade honors history class. We were listening to Memphis Minnie. The people probably know that I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. And the chorus was "Don't put that thing on me because I'm going back to Tennessee," right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's Hoodoo Blues, right? What's the title?
Mm-hmm. It's called
And,
Hoodoo Lady.
Hoodoo Lady, yeah. And we unpacked that song, and it led me down to a rabbit hole for me to like really pin a spiritual practice that was related to my childhood experience of like, at night, seeing things in my house, seeing things in other people's houses, in my dreams, and my intuition, what I used to call guessing people's mama's names. And till one day I guess somebody's mama name who is not here anymore, and it was like a Blackley middle name, or a Blackley name.
Mm-hmm.
That was like an eye opener for me, and it's been something that has been with me just from listening to somebody who knew about our tradition, and being from living in Memphis. And it empowered me as a queer person too. And it's so funny, like we don't always place hoodoo as a queer cultural artifact, this queer cultural thing, but that's all that it is, because Black people by their very Blackness are queer, because we exist in this white world where all of who we bring is not their normal, right?
Mm-hmm.
We exist within our own normal,
Oh yeah.
which is so divine and it's so beautiful. So you said your gift is bringing community, and I really want to launch into that. But before I do that, I want to really talk about like, okay, like you found hoodoo as this empowering thing to help you heal from
Mm-hmm.
your grandmother's death, and or your grandmother's ancestralization, like her becoming an ancestor. And were there moments of doubt for you when you were trying to find that practice? Like, for me, somebody who grew up in fundamentalist Christendom, I was like always that spirits didn't exist in the physical, and that negated my experience. And somebody who sees spirit with my physical eyes, right? Like I'm looking
Mm-hmm.
at my cat. And there always has been an interesting thing, like Christianity for a lot of us is a blockage, or fundamentalist Christianity is a blockage to our ancestral power.
Mm-hmm.
So I would really love to talk about how you navigated that doubt from your upbringing. Because whether you grew up in church or not, it's still there in
Mhm.
this white culture that we come up. And that is afraid of spirit. That is afraid of African spirituality. That's afraid of anything that they can control, right?
Mhm.
So I would love for you to uh, talk about that.
You know, the biggest thing, and just to kind of piggyback on what you said about people being afraid of spirits and talking about African spirituality, I think one of the biggest doubts I had was like not having community, honestly,
Mm.
not having anyone to talk to about it. And so when you know you have no one to talk to, you start thinking you fucking crazy. You'd be like, am I out of my goddamn mind?
Woo!
And that breeds so much doubt, you know, in you, because then you start wondering what's legitimate, what's real, and you start thinking, well, the legitimate thing must be what the masses are doing, right? It must be, you know, it couldn't be bad if everyone else is doing it, so maybe there's just something wrong with me. And then it requires a lot of like unpacking, honestly, a ton of unpacking about like, you know, why masses work the way they work and believe the way they believe. But even when you understand that on a fundamental level, like there's a difference between what you know and what you feel. So you might know like, okay, you know, like certain things were like forced to us and given to us, and certain attitudes towards things were forced to us, but you still feel like a deep isolation, you know. And I think a lot of people, when they kind of say, well, I still feel so many ways about the church and this and that, I think it's less about like the dogma, even though that's really like a big part, but it's more about that isolation, that lack of community. Because when
Yeah.
you have those people there, like it kind of helps move through. What I love, even though, you know, like these are not like hoodoo traditions, but what I love about traditions like Lukumi, for example, is that they have houses, they have spiritual homes, and like these people are not wandering and, you know, kind of flipping back and forth saying, you know, I'm scared because the church might do this. Like you see the importance of community. And so like the biggest thing about moving through doubt is finding someone to affirm you and like you are not crazy, you know, or I see these things too, I feel these things too, you know, there's a word for this. And also not only you and I, but also our elders and our ancestors, and maybe somebody wrote it down somewhere, maybe somebody kept a story for us and something, you know. Another part of personal doubt for me is that I'll be honest with you, like the internet can get to you, right? Because anyone can be anything on the internet. So you start getting on the internet and everyone's, and I come from a long line of such and such, and boom, boom, boom. And then you start being like, well, I don't. I think I'm
Right.
the first person in my family to do this.
Right.
And then, yeah, and then like people start like talking about what they do. And I'm like, you know, sometimes I think the trick to understand is a lot of times people online saying that is to affirm themselves. It ain't got
Mhm.
nothing to do with you personally. They need to believe what they're saying. So they're going to say it
Mhm.
out loud, and they're going to see who's going to respond and say yes or whatever. And that affirms them. And so I think sometimes taking a step back from social media and not completely disengaging, but if you kind of feel yourself comparing yourself to people, like
Mhm.
unfollow them for a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Get your mind right together first, because anyone can be anything online.
Mhm.
And I think comparison is the biggest, not only the thief of joy, but it's the biggest producer of doubt. Like you start doubting yourself based on what other people have or do, or what they say they have, or what they say they do. That's a major thing, especially as many folks do find themselves coming online to try to find and curate like these communities, you know, and these educational centers for themselves as well.
Mhm. Yes, and that's so true. And sometimes people be capping, you know,
Mm.
and that that helps me with my doubt or confidence, you know, because I realize there's the truth about who you are and the truth of what you can do. If you get away from the noise, like you said, of comparison, you can get really into your power. Like for me, uh, you know, I went to Morehouse, but I transferred there as a sophomore, and I was listening to like the voice of doubt that said like, "Oh, it's gonna be too much money. I had no scholarships and that." Until one day I had a dream that I was on campus and walking around, and you know, the narrator in my dream was like, you can be there."
Mm.
And the next week I got on the Greyhound bus, and You know, now I'm a Morehouse graduate, you know, and that was 7 years ago. Then I graduated from there. But like, what would you say is the role of that spirit of, you know, of the ancestors who walk with you in helping you conquer that doubt that people or you throw your way? You know, that's been an antidote for me. God, my ancestors, that voice, like it's clear when I compare myself. I say I'm too dark skinned, I'm too queer, I'm not tall, I stutter, right? That, you know, those are things I say to myself. I'm poor, I don't have resources, you know, I'm weird. X, Y, my chip tooth, you know, my teeth chip. I have all these, you know, I have all these voices in my head that tries to convince me that I'm less than, right? And you know, I'm just wondering, within your doubt unpacking process, did your ancestors ever tell you in your process of getting through that doubt that you know you could do it, or what did your ancestors do to get you where you are now in terms of your power?
So what's really interesting, Roman, is that I feel like the role of our ancestors and our guides and God is to activate that gift of listening in all of us, right? And I believe to listen is truly a gift. Like to listen well is a gift, to listen to everything is a gift. But we have like a society that does not teach us about listening. And so I believe their role is to teach us how to listen, because when we listen, then we listen to our intuition, you know, that keeps us safe, not fearful, but safe. We listen to our ancestors, listen to our guides who can show us, okay, here's a possibility, you know, or you can do it, or, you know, get up and dust it off if you get from the curb or whatever you say. And so one of the things that my ancestors would do, and they still do it, is that they deliver messages for me through other people. Like when it comes to writing, I ran away from writing for years. I'm like, that's, I'm like, not for me. Every time I thought about a writer, I thought about someone who was so serious and studious and unhappy. And then they hated the world so much they had to go hide in the woods and shit and create a whole new world.
Yeah, it's like Harry Potter or some shit.
So I'm just sitting here like, I don't think I want to be that. And like, writers don't have to be that. And so it's so funny because my ancestors would literally send people to say certain things like, oh, Hess, when that book coming out? Oh, Hess, what you write recently? Oh, you want to write? And I'd be like, damn,
I can see several books in you. You have a gift of language and a gift of storytelling that is so unique and so powerful. And I know Spirit's gonna open up a publisher to come to you in the next couple of years to do that. And you got this, boo. You got this.
my ancestors love to work my Black ass. I tell you that. They love to work me.
They will.
They love it. And so that's for me. It's like, you know how everyone kind of comes in these spaces, like, how do I know my ancestors are talking to me? And like the role of listening is to figure out in what ways they send you signs. So your ancestors give you through dreams. And my dreams are so abstract, I can't take them dreams seriously at all. It's like Inside Out when they go into like the weird place and everything, the shapes, whatever. Like, but for me, my ancestors send messages through other people. And I've had some wild, like even strangers say some wild stuff to me. And I'd be like, what word? And so
And you
seriously,
knew that was them. You knew
yeah.
that was your ancestors. That's so powerful. Like you said, you have to be paying the spirit within you have to be paying attention to that greater, you know, power out there that's always talking, you know,
Yes.
in that moment to be receptive.
Yes, most definitely.
Yes. Okay. I wanna talk about I'm so pumped. I gotta calm down sometimes. My spirit is
I
just
love
like,
it. Though.
okay.
I love it. It's getting me hyped too. It's making me
I'm,
giggle. So
I'm,
we good.
I'm told I'm funny. I try. But I want to know. I want to learn about the community that you helped start called the Chesapeake Conjure Society, and I, I would love for you to tell the world about what you're doing with the society.
So the thing that I love most about Chesapeake Conjure Society is that it started in the same way Hoodoo does. Hoodoo did, which is just to do, and then we worry about a name later. And so the thing is, like, people be like, "So how long has this society been around?" I'm like, we haven't had this name until 2020, but we've been doing events and everything for years. And so it was just a way to name what already existed, just the way that Hoodoo was a way to name what already existed. And so I love like that about it. Like we didn't say, and we must think of a name before we do anything. It was just like, no, we just got up and did. And then when more people started asking, hey, are there any people, any folks that we can hang out with, instead of kind of giving them a hodgepodge, just catch us here, catch us there. I'm like, okay, let's make a home, finally for people to actually have a place to like really see what we're doing, what we're up to, and all the work that we do. I'm incredibly proud of it. I'm incredibly proud of the people who have founded it with me. I always call myself a co-founder because it literally would not exist without people like Toya and Sierra and Aisha and Alexis and Harold and Nayeli. Like it would not exist without them. It literally would not. And I'm so incredibly proud of the work that they do personally, but also, through Chesapeake Conjure Society as well, because it's really about, I think it's a really good picture or a snapshot of how Hoodoo is a web. Like everyone thinks Hoodoo is this really unstructured thing because it's not hierarchical in like a pyramid shape, but it's a web, right? Like we're all interconnected. So like back in the day, maybe the blacksmith asked the midwife for something, and the midwife asked the farmer for something, and the farmer asked this, and that's all Hoodoo, right? And no person is placed above the other. You just have different specialties. And so that's the same way I feel about Chesapeake Conjure Society. Like no person is placed above the others. We just have different specialties that we do. And that's like a really near and dear thing to my heart, mainly because of just the community and how people feel and how we're able to check in with each other, and to really like even hold each other accountable, and to think things through. It just feels like a gift to be able to have those people you can sound up like, am I crazy? Did you see that random black man walk across the crossroads and all black? Like that wasn't just me, was it? Like, or like you talk about a specific place in Maryland that has such spiritual stuff and you don't have to explain, like, yeah, they get it. And it's so lovely having a community of folks who not only get it, but want to help other people get it too.
That's so powerful. I'm just getting goosebumps. I believe you all did Ancestral Reverence event of all of the slain Black women by, the police state, like Ancestral and Gaines and others. Was that with the Chesapeake Conjure Society?
Yeah,
When you first started, right?
Yeah, it was. It was one of those things we did before, because it's been going on for years now. But it was one of those things we did before we had a name for the group.
Yeah.
But like, so it's like it's ours, and also it existed before the name as well.
Ashe. So can you talk to us about how you all, Toy, you and the others put together that public ancestor altar in some ways to honor, folks like Corin Gaines and other Black women who have been victims of this police state?
Ooh, it's heavy work. I'm gonna just tell you right now. Like I think all of us cried at some point, whether we cried there, at home, or on the way. It was really heavy, and the way that we, put the altar together was the same way at home. Like the most simplest thing to do is just have some light and some water. So we got a whole bunch of candles, got a whole bunch of water. And then I think the part that hit us the hardest was actually putting up the pictures. So even though, as you know, like an ancestral altar, like you shoot bare bones with it, we just needed a glass of water and a candle, but the pictures help, give you a visualization or like something to like ignite the senses of sight. And so with Say Her Name, Ancestral Elevation, like the pictures were necessary, in like seeing the names and seeing the faces. And that was like the heaviest part of like literally putting in pictures, people, everything from like a 7-year-old girl to a 97-year-old woman, and just like putting their pictures in the frames and setting up an altar for them. We gave them like, offerings for food, we poured libation last year. And there's a video on Juju Bay's page, we did like a little, like a ring shout. It was like a more most people will think of like a ring shout as like highly celebratory, but there are some ring shouts that you do around mourning too. And Katrina Hazard Donald wrote about that as well. And so it was more of a mourning type of ring shout too that we did. It was just, it's powerful and it's simple and it's not hard to do. I think Angelia also did some folks in New York also did some, and Chicago also did some. Like it actually doesn't take a lot. You know what I'm saying? Like, even if you don't have a lot of money and you just want to write their names on some poster board, have a candle and light, that's all you really need. The most important thing to have truly is love and a community who's going to help elevate those people with you. And so at the end of each say her name elevation, it doesn't stop that day for us. Like the first day, we kind of gather the energy of the community for that first day of elevation. But then at the end, we take those pictures home and we finish that 9-day elevation for them, actually utilizing the energy of the community to push us through, because it's like a really heavy thing. And there are a lot of people who will tell you like, hey, I actually still got that picture of Corinne or Natasha McKenna, or Sandra, on my thing. Like they still hold them with them.
Wow. And so for my listeners, Juju Bay podcast, that's an amazing podcast that you should go find right now and listen to that podcast. And also has mentioned Katrina Hazard Donald. The book that I believe you're referring to is Mojo Working. And it details some history of the ring shout as it relates to hoodoo culture as well. So definitely check that book out. And so thank you. I want to honor your time. And in the last 15 minutes, ask about one thing that our listeners can do to harness their power as Black people using hoodoo. What is one practical thing they could do right now using a hoodoo practice? Like even we think about like water in a cup underneath the bed to get the ancestors better when you sleep. Something practical like that. What would you suggest?
I love practical stuff. So I'm like, I got you on this. One practical thing you can do, and I know everybody going to grope and moan, but it's actually a hoodoo tradition, is to clean your house. Clean your house, make room for those blessings, get that music on, and the music kind of helps push those energies out the door. Like every time we used to moan and groan with our mamas, and then would wake us up to music and cleaning. But as much as it's a cultural, like, oh my God, like it's energetic. The sound is moving things, the words and the music is moving things. The act of actual cleaning, you're making room for your blessings. You're getting rid of the ailments. You're getting rid of like even the ways that you could cross yourself up. That is like one of the most practical things you can do, is to honor your space in your home, because not only do you dwell there, but your ancestors dwell there. And not only do you dwell there, but because you dwell there, your descendants dwell there as well. Like it's a communal space. And people think cleansing, and the first thing they think about, well, I gotta get some Florida water. I'm like, baby, sweep them floors, or go up under your bed and clean up under your bed while you're wondering like you have bad dreams. Clean your closet out, like really clean stuff through, and see like how many things clear up for you and things you may find. I remember in one group somebody was saying something about some man wouldn't leave them alone, and then one day they cleaned under their bed, his things were under her bed, not on purpose, but it was like so symbolic of just like, get this man stuff out your house and from up under your bed, right? And it's so practical. Like just take that music and get in a deep meditative space of like cleaning and honoring your space and making room for the blessings that you want, and getting all of the ickiness out the way, because we know that having a cluttered space and everything is a symptom of having cluttered mind, and nothing wrong with it. Like we all have mental illness, this depression, anxiety, all those things exist. And also people who are depressed and anxious will tell you, hey, my house looking the way it is does add to that depression. It does add to that anxiety. And so if you're able to get the energy, because not everybody can, clean your house. Or, if you're able to get the energy, learn how to ask for help. to clean it or hire a house cleaner. Like that's one of the most practical things you can do. And I promise you, having a clean house and having a clean foundation for your work makes all the difference.
Now that spirit speaking to me because today I need to finish cleaning up my kitchen and my living room. And Ashe spirit, I got it. This is public accountability. I'm gonna clean my house. So Ashe. Ashe on that. I got your spirit. That was a good correction. Ashe. So I want to get to the last question about where can we find you online, and how best do you suggest people contact you that is not all people who are not already connected to you? How may they contact you and reach you?
So I'll say for the Chesapeake Conjure Society, we have a website. It's hoodoosociety.com. It's going to be uploaded with even more events. It has some basic information on what Hoodoo is. It has resources. It has breakdowns of some of the events that we do. It has like an All Saints Day guide on there. It got so much stuff on there as a resource, and people can still use it. So hoodoosociety.com is the website for one. For me personally, I go on Hess Love on social media. And a lot of people don't know Hess is actually my real name. People like, that's just like a social, like, no, that's my legit real name. That's on my birth certificate. And so
excuse me, I'm gonna drink some water. I'm getting thirsty.
So I go by Hess Love on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. And the best way to reach me sometimes is because, to be honest with you, I always check my inbox because it'd be a little overwhelming. It'd be some weirdos in there sometimes. Like, I don't know who this person is. But, comment, tag me or something. If you can, I'll respond to you as soon as possible.
Ashe. And is there any last words of wisdom, any insights from your spirit that you want to share with us?
So I guess the last words of wisdom is that kind of, and with the advent of social media and everything, you always have people who quote unquote read, who want to tell people who they are. And, I think we all can benefit from having some introspection and maybe some external things about us. But at the end of the day, know that your ancestors know who you are, and that, as a living embodiment of your ancestors are with you because they're in your blood. You know who you are. So don't let people push you, out of knowing who you are and out of knowing what you can do and what you're capable of. I often tell people that a lot of times our gifts in life, they reveal themselves to us in childhood. But one of the greatest tragedies about how people treat children in this society is that they love to push children out of their dreams, out of their thoughts, push them around, tell them what to do, tell them what to think. And, starting there and kind of clearing up the ways that people have tried to tell you who you are when you've always known is so, so important.
Ashe, that was so amazing. That was so amazing that what you just offered. And throughout this whole discussion, and some of the gems that you dropped was Hoodoo is Black culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's for us. It's in our bloodline, and that we can tap into it, and that as queer people, particularly, Hoodoo is for us, and we lay claim to it. It's who we are too. So Ashe, great Goddess, great one, the great Hess Love. Thank you for coming on Medicine Monday.
Thank you,
everyone. Thank you. And yeah, just thank you for your presence in this moment. And with that, I'm sorry.
As I was saying, I'm so grateful. So thank you for having me.
Ashe. Yeah, so one thing when you talk about your social media handles, I think you're also on Instagram. So I wanted folks to know if you're okay with that. Would you please tell us your Instagram as well?
Oh, of course. So it's Hess, the number 2 love for Instagram and Twitter. And again, I am better reached through the comments than the inbox. Because anybody on Instagram will tell you those little Instagram babalaos be up in there and they be hooping and howling about the ancestors told me this. I just don't check it no more. So just hit me up in the comments and I will definitely comment back to you. So it's Hess, the number 2 love on Instagram and on Twitter.
Ashe. And tell us once again where we can find the Chesapeake Conscious Society website. What is that website again?
It's hoodoosociety.com.
HoodooSociety.com. Ashe. Oh, and you know what else? I'm gonna press you on this one. Hess offers these amazing writing courses and writing things, and Hess makes these bomb hoodoo oils and all these spiritual baths and stuff. And I would love for you to talk more about that, because that's what you're telling me to do in this moment.
I did. Okay. So I make the baths and the oils once a year. And I think the thing that I'm most known for is being the flytrap oil, which is like a self-compassion oil, self-love. And it's for all genders of people. People always think, well, is it for no, it's for everybody, just to like yourself. Everybody deserves that. And the thing that I'm extremely proud of is the writing in the Hoodoo tradition workshops. It's one of my favorite things to do. I offered it October, November of last year, and I'm thinking about offering it again soon. And in each workshop, we utilize kind of like a muse, whether that's Toni Morrison, Zora Neale Hurston, Audre Lorde, somebody. And we've gone over everything from short stories to poetry to character development to writing petitions. And the thing that I love the most is literally, and Roman can tell you, because he was in one of them, I love seeing the things that people create afterwards. It's one of my favorite things about it. And just that I got a sneak peek into characters that have been like pressing them. I think of them as like spirits, stories that have been pressing them, and they kind of, share a little bit here and there. And then, sometimes they eventually like push out with more. Like that's my favorite thing. And it's also an incredibly loving space. A lot of people, like to share affirmations of people's work and what they write and what they do. And just really like giving that love and also just kind of honoring people's ancestors. We start each workshop with honoring your ancestors, who you are, your life story, your talent, all that stuff. And it's, it takes a lot of energy. But also I think it's so worthwhile. And it's literally one of my favorite things to do.
I see. And can we find where can we find the recordings of those prior classes to get a taste of those workshops that you'll do later again in the year? Where can we get the recordings for the older workshops?
Absolutely. So it is hoodoosociety.com/shop is where you'll find the recordings, and it's like $15 to get access to all 4 of them. And you get a recording of the Zoom, so it's live. And so you'll hear the people like, chatting back and forth, but it kind of adds to just the overall ambiance of it to like really not feel alone. And there's writing prompts in there and everything, and they're a lot of fun. And a lot of like self-exploration about how you take up space in the writing world, being uniquely you and having your own unique voice.
Yes, and everyone listen, those workshops were amazing. They were so good. I still go back to them, and go back to my notes that I took. And so Ashe, and I want to thank you again, Hess, the great Hess Love, for being on Medicine Monday with the Freedom Doctor. Yes, and let's be Black and let's tap into our hoodoo culture, y'all. Let's get. And with that, I say we out, and we will see you for Freedom Friday. Peace.